Good afternoon, wherever you are. We are very glad that you could join us today. Today, we are commemorating Gaia Asia Pacific's webinar event on Day of Action Against Incineration. As you know, Gaia literally stands for Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. We have our members across the world and also, of course, in Asia Pacific, upwards of 100 members who work on implementing the real solution, zero waste solutions, and stopping false solutions. So today we will be talking about false solutions, especially focusing on incineration and similar technologies. This webinar would be a space for collective narrative building and retaking popular discourse around waste and clean energy solutions, which currently are in the hands of the big industry lobbies. We would be discussing regional trends with my colleagues, Brex, who is also here with me, and issues around waste to energy and other false solutions. We will highlight the impacts of these false solutions on communities and local environments, as well as look at the policy directions and opportunities for action. This is strategically placed to coincide with Asian Development Bank's Asia Clean Energy Forum. This day of action against incineration will be amplifying the voices of affected communities and advocate for their rights and the real solutions for a clean, just, and healthy environment. So with that, I want to take a few minutes to introduce the speakers you will hear from today and the order in which we will go. So we have with us Abdul Gofar, who also goes as Gopang, who is a campaign manager for pollution and urban justice at WALI, the Indonesian Forum for Environment, or Friends of the Earth Indonesia. From 2020 to 2021, he has been the co-coordinator of the Alliance of Zero Waste Indonesia, which goes as ASVI, and Climate Justice Program Officer at the WALI National Office from 2019 to 21. Gopang has recently joined the efforts on ADB annual meeting in Tbilisi, Georgia last month, where he raised issues about refuse-derived fuel and waste to energy from the Indonesian context. Today, he'll be speaking to you all on the waste to energy trends and policy context from Indonesia. We also have with us my esteemed colleague, Brex Aravello, who's an environmental justice advocate, closely working with civil society and communities fighting for solutions to waste and climate change. Prior to joining us as Gaia Asia Pacific Climate and Anti-Incineration Campaigner, he was an active volunteer in youth-led program for sustainable development and an urban planner by profession. We also have with us joining in with Ranjit Devraj. He is a well-known science journalist, currently with SEIDev.net as correspondent. He has been the regional editor for the Inter Press Service News Agency and special correspondent with the United News of India National News Agency, and is a very well-known spokesperson on environmental justice issues in India. I'm myself, Arpita Bhagat. I work as the Plastic Policy Officer with the Asia Pacific Office of Gaia. My work focuses on engagement and mobilization of our members on global and regional policy issues to advance zero waste policies, prevent false solutions to plastic pollution, work towards plastic production reduction, as well as support the just transition for waste pickers and workers. Since the last over 10 years, I have worked with multiple international and regional organizations leading public mobilization, advocacy efforts, and movement building campaigns across many issues, including clean energy, sustainable agriculture, climate resilient cities, gender justice, and of course, plastics. With that, I want to pass on to my colleague, Brex, who would be talking about international financial institutions influencing waste to energy policies. And just as a reminder, please keep your questions on hold till the end of this meeting, where we have dedicated time to talk about questions. You could also use the Q&A option or the chat box if you're watching us on Facebook to put your questions, comments in the chat box in the room for us to take on at the end of the panel. Thank you so much, and please be on mute if you're not speaking, and wait for us to finish our presentations to take on your questions. Passing on to you, Chris.
Thanks, Arpita, and hello, everyone. Just share my screen. All right. Is my screen good? I'm not able to see anyone else. So, Arpita, are you able to see it? Okay.
Yes.
I'm seeing thumbs up there.
Ahead.
Great. All right. So hello, everyone. Again, I'm Brex Arevalo, and well, first of all, welcome to Day of Action Against Incineration. It's great to see everyone here, and hoping for a very lively discussion today. For our first session, I'll be talking about the role of international financial institutions in supporting dirty energy and false solutions, such as waste to energy, such as RDF, CCUS, and other dirty technologies. So the question here is it actually waste to waste instead of waste to energy? A little bit about Gaia. For our allies who are here, we are a global network of 1,000 grassroots groups and NGOs and individuals across the world in Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America, Europe, and US and Canada. And we envision a just zero waste world centered around respect for ecological limits and community rights, where burning and dumping are replaced with people-powered solutions. In Asia Pacific, we are a network of over 120 member organizations. Now, these are the 5 main points that we'll go through in this 15-minute presentation. First point will be that there's a massive increase in WTE investments in Asia Pacific. Number 2, false solutions are being branded as clean or renewable energy sources in energy transition programs. Number 3, international financial institutions, or IFIs, are actively shaping policies and development knowledge in favor of WTE. Number 4, there are limited civic spaces in policy and decision-making processes. And number 5, as IFIs invest in false solutions, this is leading to more problems and more debt for developing countries. Just to go through a quick review of what WTE is. When we talk about waste to energy incineration, we are referring to different technologies for disposing waste through high temperature processes such as mass burn, incineration, gasification, and pyrolysis. Over there, you'll have an image on the left of a facility in Singapore, and on the right, you'll see a facility in Thailand. And one of the main markers of a WTE facility is that big chimney. Now, it comes in different names, and this is very important as we go forward. Now, when you talk about WTE, it could be called different things like energy from waste, conversion technologies, resource recovery. You also see different kinds of WTE, such as pyrolysis and gasification, plasma arc. And as what is increasingly becoming the context, we are also seeing co-incineration methods such as biomass incineration. Again, a quick review. Why is WTE a false solution to waste and climate change? Number 1, it's known to emit greenhouse gases and hazardous substances like dioxins and furans. And very important to note that compared to coal-fired power plants, it actually produces more GHG and more in terms of toxic substances. Number 2, it does not produce renewable energy as based on the definitions of the IPCC, which recognizes that only the burning of organic waste, or the organic fraction of municipal waste, can have renewable energy potential. And also considering that in the current era of plastics, let's say, dominance in the waste streams, burning of plastics is essentially burning of fossil fuels because it is made up of 99% fossil fuels and petrochemicals. Another point is that it generates very little energy, especially in the Southeast Asian context and also in the wider Asia Pacific context, where 50 to 70% of waste is organic, which means that these facilities which prefer dry waste are not actually getting the feedstock that they need. Number four, it burns sources of livelihoods from waste pickers and waste workers who are already implementing very good solutions on the ground. And number five, these facilities are typically constructed near marginalized communities with little to no meaningful participation. Over there at the bottom, you'll see an illustration debunking one of the claims that WTE is a solution to landfills, because as you burn waste, you're actually creating toxic waste, toxic and hazardous ash from the waste, which has to be landfilled. Now, these are things that are these claims are things that are both backed up by science, by research, by CSOs, but also by experiences from communities. This is an example in Batu Arang in Malaysia, where they're currently fighting a proposed incinerator in their town. Just how many WTE facilities are we facing? Apologies for the typo over there. That's supposed to be Asia Pacific, not Southeast Asia. There are at least in the Asia Pacific region, there are at least under proposal or under construction facilities, 79 in Thailand, 17 in Indonesia, 19 in Malaysia, 7 in the Philippines, 4 in India, 16 in Vietnam, and many more. Now, one of the reasons why this may be happening is because we are seeing a shift from the more dependent, the more historically dependent countries, developed countries on waste incineration. We are seeing a move away from their reliance on it towards marketing it in different countries in the global south. So for instance, in the USA, there actually has not been a single waste incinerator developed or established in the past, I believe, 20 years. In Europe, you're seeing the European policies actually recognizing that WTE undermines its climate change objectives. So as that is happening, we are seeing the shift in the market, where now developing countries in the global south are becoming the market for WTE facilities. And also to recognize that in the Asia Pacific region, we also have so-called best practice WTE countries, or countries which have been historically dependent on these technologies. Japan and China, for instance, each have 1,000 incinerators each. We're also seeing this in South Korea and in Singapore, where interestingly enough, in the countries of Singapore and Japan, even though they have been very reliant on these technologies for decades, they are now experiencing problems with regards to space for landfills. Even saying in some of their policies that if we continue this path of waste to energy incineration, we will eventually run out of space for landfills. And that does not even include the large amount of space that WTE facilities in themselves tend to occupy. Now, just shifting gears a little bit to the context in terms of climate change. Now, this is from a report from Gaia from 2021. And what we basically did over here was we took a look at the different NDCs, or nationally determined contributions of different countries. We took a look at this because we noticed that there is a very direct, a very strong link between addressing, number one, climate change and addressing waste, where in fact the IPCC identifies waste management as one of the three sectors with the greatest potential to reduce surface temperature rise in the next 10 to 20 years. So addressing climate through the waste sector is going to be very important in the coming years. And what we found in this report was that NDCs, 39 NDCs actually include waste incineration or co-incineration methods, such as refuse-derived fuel or RDF in cement plants in their nationally determined contributions. And again, these nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are basically country blueprints for how they will address climate change. Now, shifting gears again, just how is WTE enabled through energy finance, through the different IFIs or international financial institutions? Now, we talked earlier about its branding as a clean energy source. And we are seeing here that WTE is being falsely branded, falsely promoted as a clean energy source and as a climate solutions in IFI-backed and IFI-supported programs. This could be through direct funding, direct developing of the plant, through technical assistance, where IFIs could assist local government units in how to set up a facility, and also in feasibility studies, which when you read through feasibility studies by IFIs, they typically are geared towards the narrative of developing countries need WTE facilities and there are no other options. Okay, number two, these IFIs are actively influencing policies and essentially creating artificial market demand for these projects. An example might be later on in the Philippines. We'll be showing an example where they're actively influencing policy, where they're actively influencing policy shifts within the Philippine government, wherein even though there is a ban on waste to energy incineration, they're still trying to insert these technologies in there. Another important thing to note is that as these IFIs influence policy, you are also influencing national level policies such as sustainable finance taxonomies, which essentially define what is sustainable and what can be considered as sustainable investments. Now, examples of programs where that might be relevant to you, these are big programs that influence different countries. You might have heard of the Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM, and also Just Energy Transition Partnerships, or JETP, where essentially they are trying to move away from coal-fired power reliance and onto, they would say, cleaner energy sources. But as we have discussed, WTE is actually a false solution to climate change. And we are seeing co-incineration methods such as refuse-derived fuel, which will be discussed later by our Indonesian colleague, which are being inserted into these mechanisms under the guise of being renewable energy sources. Okay, case study number one. I'll be going through different examples. WTE in the Philippines, as we mentioned earlier, it's been banned under national laws for about 25 years now. And we are seeing IFIs like ADB and JICA from Japan providing technical assistance to local governments. For example, in JICA in Davao City, JICA was known to provide technical assistance for WTE project. And what ended up happening in a campaign by different CSOs was once they wrote a letter to, including Gaia, once they wrote a letter to JICA questioning its involvement in the project, JICA said, "Oh, we're not actually included in this. We've never been included in this." So it was an interesting case where the IFI actually backed out when you saw CSOs campaigning against it. Another example is by providing technical assistance to private corporations such as Procter & Gamble, which is known to be a top 10 waste polluter or plastic pollution polluter in the world. Another is in Putri Sempo in Surakarta in Indonesia, which has its feasibility study funded by ADB. In this project, communities are complaining about strong odor and also the lack of transparency. Because this was built, very in a very closed door sort of way, with very limited participation by communities and very limited access to information. So you would actually have networks like WALHI going to these facilities, asking for information, let's say about air quality, but being turned down. And very important to note over here, and also in the wider Asia-Pacific context, in our developing country context, the tendency is that we have poor or very little low quality air quality monitoring. So if you remember in the slide before, you would see a lot of air emissions coming out of these facilities. And what's happening is in these developing countries like Indonesia, where air quality monitoring is not really very strictly implemented, it's a grave cause for concern that they are being put up. And finally, last example over here is the Swachh Bharat in India. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is the second version of a failed project that was done a number of years ago, the Swachh Bharat Mission #1. And essentially, this is going to be a municipal waste management project in Indian cities, funded by ADB. And we are highlighting this example because it is it excludes waste pickers, millions of waste pickers and waste workers that are already doing very good work in Indian cities. They were not included in planning. There is no just transition plan for them. And as we saw in the previous slide, there is an increasing number of WT facilities in India. And as you increase this number, you are increasing the number of waste that is burned and their sources of livelihood being burned. And as that happens, you are excluding and you are undermining other solutions that are already working. These are some examples of zero waste solutions that are already working in different contexts. These are available on the Gaia website. Please do have a look. Now, this webinar, as we will explain a little bit later, is happening in the context of the ASEF, the ADB Asia Clean Energy Forum, happening now until Friday. Now, this is an annual forum held by ADB, inviting clean energy practitioners, quote unquote, to promote collaboration and financing. One of the very shocking things, actually, that we saw, that once you look at the registration page of the website, you would see that under target participants, you'll see private corporations, you'll see media, you'll see governments, but you will not see affected communities or CSOs in this mix. Just earlier this morning, actually, there were a bunch of CSOs, a group of CSOs joined together here in Manila in the Philippines, calling for no more false solutions from the ADB. Now, we will discuss a little bit later about some campaign actions around Day of Action Against Incineration throughout the whole week. I think this is where my presentation ends. No, this is last call. This is my last slide. We'll be going through this later, and we invite everyone to join the Day of Action Against Incineration. I hope we can all band together and retake the narrative on what clean energy actually is, and what just transition actually is for the Asia Pacific region and for the world. Thank you very much. I'm Rex Arevalo. Here's my email, and please follow Gaia Asia Pacific on Instagram. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Rex, for that very insightful presentation. I see a hand raised, but if you could please wait till the end of the presentations to ask questions. I hope that's okay. In the meantime, if you feel like, you can also post your questions in the chat box on the right or on the Q&A section. Rex, you very well presented the regional trend on international financial institutions supporting waste to energy and promoting incineration with those case studies. Now we move on to Indonesia, where we will be talking about the enabling policies and impacts of fall solutions Indonesia. And we have with us Abdul Gofar of Mali, who we making this presentation. Gopang, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arpita, and thanks for Brex and everyone who organized this meeting. I would like to share the continuing information about the fall solutions context related to the climate crisis and of course waste crisis, and how the government of Indonesia, as part of the global countries, also promoting fall solution in the context of waste with the support of the international financial institutions. Let me share my presentations. So I would like to start the conversation with what happens in the global context and in the national context. We always heard like now the global facing triple planetary crisis, pollutions, climate change, and of course loss of biodiversity. And based on our organizational analysis, plastic is connecting to three of the triple planetary crises. Plastic is the root cause of the climate change. Plastic is the root cause of the loss of biodiversity. And of course, plastic is the root causes of the pollutions. And of course, we need to talk about the 9 planetary boundaries. We have 9 planetary boundaries, and 6 of the boundaries have been exceed the limits. And of course, with the triple planetary crisis and the 6 from the 9 planetary boundaries exceeded, we are in the dangerous situations related to the global situation on the environment. So I will move with the emergency situations. In 2015, the global countries agree to working together in the name of the Paris Agreement to limit the global temperature below the 1.5 degrees. But now in 2024, or at least in December 2023, Climate Action Tracker mentioning that now we are in the situation 1.3 degrees Celsius. So we still have 0.2 in the next of the 7 years. I think it's a difficult situation for us, for the global citizen, without the strong policy, without the strong climate action from the government, and of course from the corporate that become the climate polluters and global emitters. And of course, all regions in India, in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Africa, in Latin America, and in the every part of the world is facing lots of the climate crisis impact, like heat wave, extreme weather, flood, and lots of the ecological disaster. And now, based on the latest IPCC report, AR6, IPCC mentioning that to prevent the Earth temperature from rising 1.5 degrees Celsius, stop the emissions no later than 2025, and to need to reduce at least 43% the emissions by 2030. So I think with the current situation, oil companies already push for the increasing the production, and of course the oil company would like to increasing the plastic production, and they would like changing the commodity from fossil fuel to the plastic and related to the petrochemical industry. I think that's the difficult situation related to the waste and plastic context. And when we're talking about the climate change in Indonesia, I would like to start like waste sector is very important, because based on the inventory of the greenhouse gas emissions, waste sector is number 4 as the main source of the greenhouse gas emission contributor. So it's big numbers, and it's coming from the several contexts like industrial wastewaters and solid wastewaters, liquid, solid, domestic wastewater, solid waste from the domestic, liquid waste from the domestic, and solid and liquid waste from the industrial context. And why is it important? Because the government of Indonesia starting lots of the climate action project in the name of, okay, we will following the Paris Agreement. We already ratification the Paris Agreement on our national law, and then the government planning several projects actually to address several emission sources like forest and other land use, pollution, energy sector, industrial sector, and of course waste sector. And unfortunately, based on our government's planning on the climate change as part of the Paris Agreement's movement, the government is starting to build a 35 gigawatt electricity project, including co-firing mechanism between coal-fired power plant and biomass and plastic and waste. And it's also including waste to energy incineration in 12 metropolitan area in the Indonesia. You can see the maps, mostly in Java Island, the most populous island, and several projects in Bali, in Sumatra, and in Sulawesi. And the government also planning this full solution project like RGF and waste to energy incineration as part of the national strategic project. So the government give incentive like a tax given, the easy way to like starting the project without environmental impact assessment, without like investment risk, and lots of the easiest way to support the investor starting to build waste to energy incineration in Indonesia. And of course, talking about what Gaya analysis on the government's NDCs planning, it's also including the whole solution as part of the NDCs on the adaptation and mitigation context. So waste sector that contributing 7 until 12% from our national greenhouse emission will address by the development of the waste to energy incineration and RDF in more than 50 coal-fired power plant. So I will move on the specific planning. This is the document from our enhanced NDC. So the government of Indonesia already revised 2 times our national determined contribution, and they mentioning we already became the more progressive countries on NDCs, at least in Asia Pacific. But if you look more deeper on the document, the waste sector only planning to reducing the emission with the first scenario 1.5%, and on the second scenario 1.5% Celsius. You can imagine the waste sector contributes 7 and 12% until 12%, sorry, but the planning is to reducing the emission from the waste sector only 1.5 until 1.4 and until 1.5 degrees between 2 scenarios, business as usual and with the international support. So the contribution from waste sector on our planning on the emission reduction is very lower than the actual contribution. And then in the next years, we are planning for the 10 years after the Paris Agreement, the government of Indonesia will revise the NDCs, but it's still including the full solution like waste to energy incineration and RDF context. So I will mention that's from the document on the adaptation and mitigation scenario on the waste sector. It is coming from the enhanced, what so-called as enhanced NDC. It's mentioning specifically PLTSA, waste to energy incineration and RDF implementations. They will planning to develop waste to energy incineration and RDF facilities to treat 4.5 million ton municipal solid waste to avoiding 1.9 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent. That's the planning, but the actual context is the waste to energy incineration will increasing the pollutions, dioxin, furan, persistent organic pollutants, and of course, it's not reducing the emission, especially on the methane context, because we have more than 300 landfill. It's mostly on the open dumping, and they produce more methane emissions, not only on the another kind of the emissions. And of course, the co-firing mechanism will keep the coal-fired power plant that we have like hundreds coal-fired power plant operating more longer than the planning on the phase out or phase down on the coal-fired power plant. So the RDF mechanism will make the use of the coal-fired power plant more longer than the planning for the energy transition mechanism. And of course, what's the important thing is our composition of the waste is dominantly bioorganic, and just depending with the waste to energy incineration is not the solutions. The government needs to like reducing the organic waste come to the landfill, prevent the methane release from the landfill from the source, increasing the waste integration and the community partnership on the context of the waste reductions. And from the last context of the Indonesian Power Solutions context related to the waste issue. In G20 meeting in Bali 2022, with lots of the intimidation with civil society, that's the same situation in India 1 year after the Bali meeting. The G20 countries with the support of the G7 countries released the commitment on just energy transition partnership with the commitment of 20 billion US dollars commitment for the energy transition mechanism. But in the fact, it's not focusing on the coal-fired power plant retirement or another fossil fuel power plant retirement. In fact, the document mentioning specifically, including 52 coal-fired power plant co-firing with the waste and with the biomass, to make longer the coal-fired power plant, not only 30 years as part of the concession agreement, but we'll make it like 40 years and 50 years operational. And of course, mentioning waste-to-energy project, at least the rest of the 8 project, we're planning 12, and now it's still 8 project. And it's a long scale for type of the meaningful participation for the affected communities and lots of the greenwashing, using coal gasification, coal methane, and not planning to installing the renewable energy that part of the solution on the climate context. So it's the RDF project in Indonesia already started in 2022 with support of the Denmark governments, and this is the process. I will move to who invests in the climate fall solution in Indonesia. It's dominantly by Asian Development Bank that Brex mentions. They have energy transition mechanism, but full of the loan, full of debt, full of the exclusion for the impacted communities, and still support for the waste to energy incineration and support for the co-firing in the coal-fired power plant. And JP mechanism, I already analyzed the CIPP document, Comprehensive Investment and Policy Plan. It's also including the waste to energy incineration and RDF in 52 coal-fired power plant. And AIIB from China will give 150 billion US dollar loan to government of Indonesia to build RDF and the co-firing mechanism in coal-fired power plant. So JICA, GPIC, IFC, China Construction Bank is also the buyer of the investment. That's the context on the plastic treaty, why the government of Indonesia maybe still support the close burning, because it's a part of our national policy on the climate and energy. And as the developing countries, the government are always mentioning we need to increasing the waste management facility infrastructure. We need investment with the infrastructure such as waste energy incineration, RDF, pyrolysis, and anything. And the government of Indonesia support carbon credit mechanism, and maybe they will support plastic credit, plastic offset mechanism. Thank you for the context. Sorry for taking more time. Back to Arpita. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopang. I really hope that those of you here enjoyed listening to him. We have now heard of the context from Indonesia, and now we can move on to our next presentation, which is presenting carbon offsets, the case study from Okla Waste to Energy Plant, which is in New Delhi in India. And I'm wondering if Ranjit is already here and is ready to present. I can see Ranjit here. Ranjit, can you unmute yourself, please? Okay, I guess we wait for a few more minutes for Ranjit to unmute. Yes, I believe he's ready. Sir, could you unmute? You are on mute. We can't hear you.
Unmute. Okay,
Yes.
am I? Oh,
Yes,
yeah, hello.
we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So actually I think I should introduce myself. I'm basically a science journalist. I happen to live in Sukhdev Vihar, and I was part of a Supreme Court committee on waste management. So I've been involved in Gaia activities for some time now. Since Pratibha's time, I've been around. So now the thing is, the fall solutions. Yeah, absolutely. I fully understand what this thing is all about, and I think that India, particularly Delhi, has been a huge victim of this kind of false narrations that you can get rid of unmixed waste, unsegregated waste, not unmixed, unsegregated waste, mixed unsegregated waste by incineration. Firstly, you're putting the cart before the horse. You cannot incinerate unless you first segregate into the different components, the different fractions. That is to say, whether it is organics or plastics or what have you. So we are in this situation where people insist that you can burn mixed waste without segregation, without going through the process of segregation. And you have all the attendant evils that come from such a policy. We have 4 incinerators in Delhi already burning 7,000 tons of unsegregated waste. And so you can imagine that that's a major health hazard within Delhi. Delhi has long been considered the world's most polluted capital city. And this is one of the factors, one of the major factors causing environmental pollution in Delhi. And it's not just the smoke, it's the large residues. I'm talking about the bottom ash and the fly ash, which nobody knows how to dispose of. There's no proper disposal mechanism available. You're talking about tons and tons of toxic ash, which has to be buried somewhere, dumped. They were originally dumping it on the way, landfills. Then there were protests. Now they're dumping it in quarries. So it is endless. And the policy continues. I would say that Delhi's is a typical case of where the policy has gone completely awry, where people are locked into a kind of technology which is unsustainable, patently unsustainable, that is poisoning such a large city, which actually has something called atmospheric inversion, which prevents the circulation of air, particularly in the winter months. So you have a situation where these plants are located within residential areas. You have a situation where all the existing rules are violated regarding the type of incineration you have, the size of the incinerations. Each incinerator handles about 2,000 to 3,000 tons per day. And that's a terrible thing. There's no segregation. It's unmixed. I'm sorry, again, I'm saying that unsegregated waste with low calorific value, producing large amounts of ash. And it is endless. I'd be happy to take questions that any of you may have. But I can tell you that this is a plant that actually earns carbon credits for poisoning Delhi's air with dioxins, furans, mercury vapor, lead, heavy metals, everything, sulfur dioxide. It has been fined. The authorities have fined it for releasing dioxins and furans into the air. But yet they're unable to stop it because everybody's locked into this technology. They're not even trying to improve anything at all. More of them are being built. The target is to burn all of the 12 to 15,000 tons that are produced every day. So we are in a kind of an emergency situation where that people are being poisoned without even knowing what is happening to them. Can I stop here? Hello?
Yes, of course you can. I just wanted to pose few questions just as a means to kind of enable this discussion and share back that you're doing right now, sir. So my first question is sort of what steps did you take to mobilize the community in the neighborhood of the waste to energy plant to kind of organize them, to get them to realize, the impacts of incinerator, and how did you approach the agency?
Well, it's very simple. Our activity has been multi-pronged. First of all, there was an awareness campaign. We brought in the best scientists and other people who, environmental scientists, We've almost a door-to-door campaign about the ill effects that people are going to face, that how property values are going to go down, that we sensitize them to the specific kinds of pollutants that come out of waste incinerators that burn unsegregated waste, that we organized rallies, and most importantly, we went into litigation. We filed public interest litigation in the National Green Tribunal, the Delhi High Court, and currently the case continues within the Supreme Court. We are waiting for a hearing on July 18th now. Our litigation is older than the plant. Even before they set up the plant, the litigation began. So you see, we've been very active that way. We have written to the UNFCCC saying that this plant cannot possibly merit carbon credits because they switched the technologies. The original technology was for which the license was given, was for making refuse-derived fuel, RDF, at 2800 kcal per kilogram. What they are burning right now is not even 900 kcal per kilogram. It is actually illegal to send such low calorific value waste to a waste to energy plant. So that's what we have been doing. And then, of course, there's been this huge media campaign. We have just tons and tons of material, even in international publications. Many international publications carried this story. I myself wrote many articles on this, explaining what this is about. For example, Down to Earth. I've written my pieces on Down to Earth. I've written pieces in just about every paper, including my own agencies, news agencies that I work for. So it's been multi-pronged. We have had approached it from every direction. We have tried to sensitize officials. We met the government officials concerned, but it's all to no avail, because you're looking at the power of the corporates, the power of virtually crony capitalism at play.
Yes,
Hello?
thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Any
Thank you
other
for
questions?
sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will hold on for questions. I wanted to understand also sort of the timeline of action, what kind of reactions you got, how did you see the role of media coming together? And of course, I know there are people from India, from different parts of the world who would be keen to understand how to take community action and learn from you.
Okay. I would say that this is new technology in India, relatively new technology. In India, the traditional method of dealing with waste was by dumping. But so Delhi alone has 3 large dumps that are more than 60 to 70 meters high. Now, the problem with dumping is that it generates methane, it spontaneously catches fire. In the monsoons, there's leachate flowing down into the groundwater. There are landslides even. But so there has to be a solution. Now, that solution cannot be incineration, especially incineration of unsegregated waste. So this is something we needed to get people to understand what the problem was. We needed to tell the bureaucrats, sensitize them as well. Not that they needed any sensitizing, but they were sort of in a denial mode. They were very sure that the technology the corporates were bringing in was sound, and that they were being honest about it, that they were not going to switch technologies. That's one of the funny things, that you switch technologies. I can also say that media in India has been on the back foot for some time now. Media is owned by corporate interests, and that makes it very difficult to say anything independent. So, but then there's social media. There are groups like Down to Earth with their the Center for Science and Environment, which have been doing fairly recent work. I will be attending one of their seminars in a couple of days, again on the same topic. So I have been personally doing a lot of work as speaking to journalists, a large number of journalists, also sensitizing them to the work of Gaia in particular, because we have we have no civil society in India. They've all been shut down. That's a serious problem. You can't operate an NGO in India. You need clearances from the Home Ministry. They won't give you clearances if you're going against a corporate interests. They shut you down. They've shut down people like Greenpeace. They've shut down Oxfam. They've shut down everything that's worth shutting down. So you have a situation where there's no civil society, there's no media worth anything. They influence the judiciary. And the problem is much larger than waste management. It's a problem of governance.
Yes, absolutely. And being a fellow Indian and being a climate campaigner for a long time now, I completely know where you're coming from. I have been with Greenpeace, and I also lost my job after the whole crackdown that happened in 2018. So, sir, I know what you're talking about, and how this issue expands beyond just waste management. And of course, that's the point that we are also trying to make about the intersection with climate, the intersection with the growing, fascist regimes across the world, and especially in Asia. Also, this obsession of technocratic solution, this obsession of capitalistic greed that's coming in from the global north, but now it's being mainstreamed as the need for poverty alleviation, the need for sustainable development goals, and so on. So I really appreciate you sharing these thoughts, and I'm hoping that we will have more questions and you can stay a little longer. Having seen your work and having read your work, I'm really glad to be in your presence today. And thank you for supporting Gaia all this while.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with Gaia.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. We can move on to the next presentation, which is from me. This is the last presentation. So, Belmiro, if you're here, could you share the screen? And Ranjit sir, could I ask you to go on mute again, please?
I will, yes.
Thank you so much. And those of you, I know you've been waiting for your questions to be addressed. I promise you we will take it at the end and we will try to get to all questions. Really appreciate everyone being here and sharing and participating and really listening and paying attention. You don't really have to know about the issues here, and everyone is welcome to ask questions. So please keep them coming. I'm here to be talking about the emerging trends and drivers of false solutions, specifically looking at how incineration, waste to energy, and other similar technocratic so-called solutions are being propagated through policy mechanisms, especially via the Global Plastics Treaty, as well as some regional policy avenues that are in action in Asia Pacific. So just first of all, just giving you a brief background, and for those of you who are not aware, the Global Plastics Treaty basically is the ongoing negotiation for an international agreement on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. That's how it's framed. The timeline that is being kept for this treaty to be finalized is fairly short. It basically started with the UN Environmental Assembly recognizing the need for addressing plastic pollution way back in its very first Environmental Assembly in 2014, to UNEA 3rd and 4th in 2017 and 2019 respectively, recognizing this need even further, and at UNEA 5.2, which happened in 2022, member states, which are the countries who are members of the UN, agreeing to create an international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. And this was considered a historic moment. This Global Plastics Treaty, however it is named and framed, is expected to be the most important multilateral environmental agreement after the Paris Accord that of 2015 for climate. And basically this instrumental moment, which was recognized through the resolution 5/14 on the next slide, the mandate of which came from resolution 5/14, it basically recognized and acknowledged the need for global coordinated action, given the failure of regional and national policy regime, various voluntary initiatives, and also the recognition that most of the policy instruments to address the plastic problem looked at the downstream measures via the plastic waste management rules or extended producer responsibility laws that we will hear about a little bit further. And just to emphasize this resolution, as it's framed, already talks about addressing plastic through a comprehensive life cycle approach, starting from the production, sorry to go back to the previous slide, starting from the production with the extraction of fossil fuels to the disposal or the downstream measures. And this is the first opportunity to create harmonized definitions at the global level to address global plastic production, global plastic pollution, global finance to tackle plastic pollution. And it's also the first global avenue to unlock systemic change, to move away from plastics at the pace and the scale that's required. And of course, a strong plastics treaty would address the entire petrochemical, plastic, FMCG industry to shift towards zero waste solutions, as we call them at Gaia, to shift towards reuse and of course environmentally sound design. And the expectation when we started with this whole process of the treaty is to have a high common minimum standard and to harmonize the existing, at the time, heterogeneous regulatory landscape that would reduce technical complexity, lower operational costs, as well as compliance costs. And this instrument is also important because it's trying to address a particularly complex material issue that plastics are. As you know, plastics are composed of polymers, which are, of course, monomer units combined together, as well as chemical additives and different chemicals that are generated and through the entire life cycle of the plastic. It has transboundary impacts, and it doesn't focus on one particular matter, such as the Montreal Protocol, Minamata Convention for Mercury. So therefore, the expectation from this treaty are particularly high from us as civil society. We expect predictability to come in. We expect the treaty to trickle down on national governments to kind of push the ambition at the national level as well, with the existing domestic laws to handle plastic burden, and not just as at the waste level, but starting at the production level. And also, given that we are in the global south as Asia Pacific, and I know we have our members from Africa joining in us today, as well as from Latin American countries, it would specifically also benefit low-income countries who could not individually have the finance, the regulatory, and the technical expertise to prevent plastic pollution, given the cost of coming together and organizing a treaty at this level. So far in the treaty, on the next slide, if we can talk about the expectation, of course, is that the treaty addresses the entire life cycle from the upstream, but also downstream through plastic leakage. For example, we know there is the false narrative around Asia and Asian countries being the larger, the biggest polluters to ocean pollution, but also understanding that this is not just because Asia is itself a high consumer, but global north countries exporting a lot of the plastic waste to Asian countries in the name of plastic waste trade. It's also a result of global north sort of countries and the result of globalization, where sachet economy is promoted and seen as this lifestyle of disposable lifestyle, as we call them, propagating all of those practices from global north to global south. And also to remind us, and this is something we have a very ambitious timeline to draft this treaty. We have five meetings starting in November 2022, going on to November, December of this year to draft the treaty. We have had 4 negotiating committee meetings so far. Progress has been, I would say, mixed. A lot of our members, a lot of civil society has been working very hard to push ambition, to keep ambition up, and to support country delegates to advocate for a strong treaty that looks at this life cycle. But of course, the scope of the treaty, as I've called here, is still being negotiated, even though it's very clearly mentioned and written in the resolution 5/14. We have those the industry and countries with vested interest, those who are heavy oil producers, as well as petrochemical industry, as well as high consumers of plastics, who do not want a treaty that looks at reducing production, that looks at plastic as a fossil fuel issue. In fact, in the treaty, in the draft, in the different sort of papers, so many documents that have come out from the Secretariat, as well as from different, thank you so much for sharing the link, that have come out from the negotiations so far. The mention of fossil fuel has not happened at all, while we know that that's the key to address the treaty. And just to remind us, from a latest research that came out last year from the folks at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory that Gaia supported, 75% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and I know my colleague has also been talking about climate connections of plastics, of waste so far, 75% of greenhouse gas emissions have come from production of primary plastics, that is virgin plastics, that occur before polymerization, that is before the processing of the raw material used for plastics for production, that is at the plastic production polymerization stage. These 75% of emissions are happening at the extraction and refining stage of fossil fuels before production of intermediate chemical products, including monomers. This is something that is instrumental, that basically reminds us that we need to recognize the connection of plastics with climate, with the Paris Agreement. And in order for Paris Agreement to meet its goals, curbing plastic production, stopping petrochemical extraction for plastics is absolutely instrumental to meet the 1.5 degrees carbon budget. So this is just a reminder of this battle that we have. On the next slide, you will see some images from the last INC meeting. Next slide, please. Where we saw the industry really pushing hard, really ensuring that their narratives are present loud and clear. They talked about how plastics save lives through healthcare, whereas where we have enough studies with the NGOs like Healthcare Without Harm, and also Scientist Coalition, who've made it clear that healthcare can move away from plastics. They also talked about how plastics are important for packaging, for food preservation, which we know are untrue, because in the Asia Pacific, as Asians, we know back in the 90s, all of the packaging, all of the material was through the so-called, what we recognize now as reuse and refill systems. And it's possible to revert back to those systems. And these are also the systems that support the local economy, support local livelihoods. These industry ads also talked about circularity, something that is very important for us as we go on into this discussion on how circular economy, plastic circularity, and all of those narratives, all of those frameworks are becoming mainstreamed as a vehicle really to propagate for solution. Moving on to the next slide. And just to remind us all that industry influence continues to grow in these negotiating meetings for plastics treaty. With each meeting, we see a higher level of participation, and these are only from the publicly available data and evidence that we have from the Secretariat. But we need to remind ourselves that the presence of these industry actors who are actually the root cause, who have generated and who have created the plastic crisis, create power imbalances that obstruct progress. And we know that's the case if you assess the progress from the negotiations so far. rights holders, civil society representatives, waste picker groups, indigenous peoples cannot sit silently. We call for inclusive participation. We are calling to continue to call for the capture or corporate capture of this process. We'll talk a little bit more about as we go on. We know that there are models for conflict of interest in other multilateral treaties that we can look upon and end corporate capture. There is an open letter for support to end this corporate capture. We've been asking for the Secretariat to take account of this industry, fossil fuel industry, chemical industry lobbies presence. And what's more worrying, and I've just posted that letter in the chat box for you to look at, for you to endorse. What's even more worrying is that a lot of these industry lobbies come under the garb of official delegates, official country delegates. That means they sit at the negotiating table and negotiate on behalf of the countries. This has been seen from Malaysia, from Thailand, Iran, China, and of course, informally from other countries as well. Particularly, a good example of that is Indonesia. And we just heard from Gopang from the Indonesian context. And collectively, these representatives bypass, Pacific Small Island Developing States, which are 39 countries in the treaty negotiation, which should get us really worried. And therefore, we need to safeguard the negotiations and prioritize participation of frontline communities, independent scientists, recognize the role of independent science through a science policy panel. And just to remind us, the science policy panel, the open-ended working group for the science policy panel for chemicals and waste is meeting in June in Geneva, where there will be steps taken to discuss how this science policy panel could be formalized, what forms it could take, what governance it could adopt, and so on. So our rights, our stakes are very high in the treaty negotiations, and we need to also recognize the role of these communities. And moving on, I will talk a little bit more about these different narratives and how different policy regime could mainstream the false solution that we are talking about on this day of to end incineration. Next slide, please. So we have talked about circular economy. We know the different framings it takes, but we need to also unpack what it means. It sounds really like a fantastic solution, but we should know true circularity, true circular economy is a myth. It's only possible in nature. When we studied about circulating nutrients, we studied about nitrogen, oxygen, all of those cycles. But when we look at industry on the next slide, circular economy and really plastics production are plan B of the industry. And this is not something new for those of you who've been involved in sort of following the trends. The petrochemical industry is really banking on plastic and polymer production to sustain its profits. Petrochemicals already account for 14% of oil use, and they are on their way to drive half of oil demand from now till 2050 from plastic production. They are getting, these circular economy plans are getting accelerated on the background of the ongoing negotiations. And on next slide, you will see some of these greenwashing masterminds, as I like to call them, from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, which is a non-profit from the producers like Exxon, Dow, Chevron, Shell, who, as we know from the 1970s, really are the people who knew before all of us in the world that petrochemical, that fossil fuel industry will cause the climate crisis, but continue to extract and produce petrochemicals, knowing that, and exploit our nature's resources. The Business Coalition has over 200 endorsers from producers, to brand owners, recyclers, retailers, business organizations, companies who are promoting plastic credits, as well as this group is convened by Worldwide Federation for Environment, WWF, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is heavily involved in plastics treaty negotiation. These players have been pushing recycling as a remedy to plastic crisis. They have been talking a lot about plastic circularity, and in their definition of plastic circularity, chemical recycling, really fares very high. There is a lot of focus on recycling. They spend millions of dollars in lobbying and campaigning and public relations, all backed by corporate money. Plastics Industry Association, American Chemistry Council, American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers. All of these are, in cahoots to greenwash and continue plastic production and sort of promote recycling. And we know if recycling was the right solution, we would not see the kind of legacy plastic pollution that we see today, plastic leakage, and we know only 9% of plastic recycling actually happens. And even the global north countries, from France to US to Canada, actually rely a lot on waste incineration to solve these so-called plastic crisis. And of course, these amazing groups are supported by the consulting mafia, as we like to call them, different firms like Deloitte, KPMG, McKinsey, Ernst & Young, who help sort of mainstream and sort of justify the narratives of these different industry bodies through research, through reports. And ahead of actually INC4, there was a report by the International Council of Chemical Associations that said that that cap on virgin plastic production, primary plastic production, would have negative effects across industry in general and broader global economy. Whereas we know that that's not the case. We have produced various studies. We have the independent science bodies who have reminded time and time again that there is an economy outside of plastic production who continue to show that plastic-free economy, zero waste transition could support and could kind of continue to promote, to support the industry, the economy that we need. Our friends, Asian Development Bank, that you hear so much, and we have a dedicated campaign in Asia Pacific against Asian Development Bank's different policies. ADB is also advising development of EPR framework, something I'll also have a slide on that, and plastic credit schemes to implement advanced waste management technologies. And we know advanced waste management technology basically stands for the good old advanced recycling, chemical recycling that Grex has talked about, and why that's a problematic solution. ADB also promises to support global plastics treaty implementation through financing, including sovereign and private sector lending, with added co-benefits for climate action. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, we need to remember, that waste colonialism is also being mainstreamed, is also being supported through plastic circularity, umbrella. And it has been invoked to oppose limits to plastic production. It has happened. Many countries, including from Asia, even in the last INC, talked about why the plastics treaty should not include waste trade or any kind of trade restrictions, given the existing multilateral instrument. They named BRS, and we know that BRS, there is ample documentation that BRS is not enough. Gaia also had a policy brief come out looking at assessing at the gaps of existing instruments and why plastics treaty need to include and address this issue. We have ample evidence to show that plastic waste exports are ending up in Asia, and they're ending up there to be burned, to be dumped, because of course, if the global north does not have enough waste infrastructure, how do you expect the poorer global south countries in Asia to have that kind of infrastructure to support this kind of problem? We also have our own secretariat on the next slide. UNEP itself produced a report, next slide please, which is called the Spotlight Report. Next slide please, guys, on which is called, sorry, go back one slide, slide number 12. UNEP Spotlight Report, or Turning Off the Tap Report. And this is quite a comprehensive report. It came ahead of INC2, that means last summer in May. It was prepared in part by Systemic, another consulting firm that supports this plastic circularity and of course supports waste burning. It took into account industry voices. It took into account, it ignored civil society and independent scientists. And I know for a fact over 300 comments were submitted by the Scientist Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty. Please share the link for that if you can, which were unaddressed. And this report was produced and went ahead. It recognizes waste burning. It recognizes chemical recycling. It recognizes co-processing as legitimate solutions. And this is a problem because plastics, if a global agreement legitimizes these solutions, all of the regional policy spaces, all of the national policies will also be able to make these solutions mainstay of their policy regime, which means that we will have a very hard time fighting these battles at the local level. This will also mean that they will incentivize investments from different sources. Of course, we have the IFIs, but we also have the likes of World Bank already supporting some of these false solutions. I also have a slide on that. It also recognized bio-based plastics as viable alternative. We've talked a lot about why bio-based plastics are not the right solution and are, for Gaia and for many of us in the BFFP movement, part of the false solution paradigm. This report also proposed global design for circularity rules and standards, a very heavy word, for international consistency and avoid loopholes, which could create a myriad of different standards and rules. Again, this could have standards of, for waste incineration, for chemical recycling, for all of these issues that are of concern to us. On the next slide, I also present the framework for circular economy from ASEAN. That is the Asia, that is the Association of South Asian Nations, which is a association that operates in Southeast Asia, that comes out with a lot of policy frameworks and have its own goals. And one of the things they are looking at is a framework for circular economy. And again, they are looking at how do you push for circular economy in a way that it enables business goals, which again is a concern. Next slide. We have long been cycling material. We know that through repair, reuse, as well as recycling. These are not new ideas. Ellen MacArthur Foundation and all of these different folks that I named and shamed just now are co-opting these old concepts that we had, especially in Asia and Africa. These are old practices, and now they are taking over these practices to include processes that destroy materials, that burns plastics, that burns waste, and that could fuel further the climate crisis concern, as well as amplify injustices for communities who are already harmed by plastic production. Lastly, on the next slide, I know I've taken a lot of time already, but to sum us up, we also have on the next slide how plastic credits are coming up in a big way. They could again be, they show up as innovative financial mechanisms in the plastic treaty as private sources of funding. Next slide. Where companies, where industry are seeing offsets as a way to continue waste colonialism, as a way to justify plastic credits. And basically, plastic credits are also coming up with the extended producer responsibility rules. And we have seen this example from the Philippines, where basically thermal treatment is being included as a way to provide, to claim plastic neutrality, to get credits and so on. Its plastic credit applications could show up in all of these provisions from the treaty, of course, in waste management, but also in just transition. It could show up in emissions and releases, and it could also show up in financial mechanism, but also national action plans that will look at how countries will implement the treaty. And lastly, on the next slide, all of this comes together. Plastic credits, circular economy, EPR is coming together as almost like a nexus at the local level, but also at the international levels, at the regional level with policy regimes like the ASEAN that could legitimize waste burning, that could actually incentivize polluters to burn waste. So if we remember, EPR came out as a policy paradigm polluters pay responsibility, right? But now it could be framed, it could be used to justify burning of waste, to justify false solutions through plastic credits, and to justify continuing pollution and encourage burning and actually reward polluters through plastic credits type schemes. Innovating financing also has World Bank spending a lot of money, millions of dollars through, on the next slide, through plastic credit company, and the big ones are Vera, which is global, Repurpose Global. There is also Plastic Credit Exchange in Philippines, who are using this money and creating different kind of bonds, different kind of schemes. Through this scheme that I mentioned here, World Bank is spending money on recycling in Indonesia. There's also a project going on in Ghana. And all of these projects are basically supporting false solution. Lastly, I want to remind us we have a smoke and mirrors report, which we produced ahead of INC3, along with BFFP on plastic credits, and we analyzed Vera and PSX claims of offsetting, claims of recycling, that we actually found that there is hardly 14% of the actual projects money that they're spending on mechanical recycling or true recycling, at least to an extent. Sorry for taking so much time. Thank you for your attention. You could scan this QR code to look at our resources for plastics treaty, and I hope you found this presentation and all the other presentations insightful. On the next slide, there is my email address if you want to reach out to me. But that's it. We can now move on to the Q&A section fairly quickly. I have some questions already that I would go to for us to start having a discussion. Question for Brex. Is there a better solution to manage the unsegregated waste that already exists in landfills for decades, especially in the developing countries context? Brex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks. Just very quickly. In Gaia, we're still developing our position on this one, but what we are for sure about is that reducing the amount of waste that goes into landfills is really number one. It shouldn't go into landfills in the first place. And number two, just to reiterate again the landfill argument from WTE, it's that WTE does not solve the landfill issue because it creates toxic and hazardous ash that eventually has to be landfilled somewhere. So you eventually create like a it's a pick your own poison type of problem that you end up having regarding landfills if you choose to go retaking route. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to this.
Yeah, and just to kind of also add my 2 bits. Thank you so much, Grex. So essentially, if we sort of segregate our waste in the categories that we have allotted, it will be found, and especially in developing countries, over 60% of waste is actually vegetable or wet waste that can be processed, that can be composted in a decentralized fashion, and as also setting up composting plants or biogas plants. We also have the methane work that we do in Gaia in a big way. We have actually the methane conference coming up. We have the Organics Congress coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the remaining waste, actually, we talk about the zero waste solution. If we shift to reuse, it will actually prevent a lot of the waste already. I think we have the numbers somewhere in the reports. It's not on top of my head. But yes, it's the long-term and the short-term solution that we can definitely speak for. I'll go to the next question.
Can I say something? Yeah, before you
Yes,
finish,
please, of course.
Ranjit here. You see, a lot of this has to do with engineering. It has to do with the boiler design. Now, if you have manufacturers making boilers that are designed to burn mixed waste, then where are you? They swear by technology which is aimed at incinerating mixed waste. That's the whole problem. It's the boiler design. And that's where we need to focus attention on. We should not be producing this kind of outdated technology. And especially they're trying to push these technologies and these equipments into third world countries. Like India, for example. Delhi, the boilers we have are not designed to burn RDF. They're designed to burn mixed waste. They come from China. And that is a fundamental issue here for us anyway in Delhi. And I'm sure across Asia too. People are not critical about the technologies that are being deployed, the technologies that are being circumvented, bypassed, and so on. Just my bit.
No, that's absolutely true. And thank you for adding that. All of these technocratic solutions are actually false because of not just the pollution they cause, because we cannot really afford them in the developing context. And in the long run, there is that worry that we will, we need to design materials management system that are designed to mimic the design of natural ecosystem. That's absolutely true, which is why if you look at the zero waste hierarchy that we are talking about, it starts at redesign of material. Going on to the next question, what just transition organizing strategies are groups discussing to shift policies and financing away from waste to energy schemes and towards community and worker solution for a zero waste future? This is a very important question and a very difficult one, but I'll pass on to Gopang to start addressing it.
Thank you, Arpita. Thank you, Ananda, for raising these important questions. Actually, it's our homework together in the global, regional, or the national context. Our organization has small experience on the just transition works in the energy context. So the government already have their definitions on the just transition, just energy transitions, alignment with the just energy transition partnership, cooperation with the global north, and of course the international financial institutions. What we are doing is make a different alignment, redefining what's the meaning of the just energy transitions, because the government's, the international financial institution definition is not just, this is injustice. So we develop like a consultation with the impacted communities, at least that working with us in the area of the coal-fired power plant, including the fisher folks that impacted from the wastewater dumping from coal-fired power plant, with the indigenous people that stolen their land to the developing of the fall solution project, and of course the peasant that has impacted to their rice field. So we start like developing consultation, and we develop our position on what we call as the just energy transitions, the value, the principle, and our demand. So we are not like try to navigate the government's, the company's definition, but we try to push our definition. So if the government would like to mentioning just transitions, just energy transition, they need to acknowledge the definitions, the concept, the value, the principle from the communities, including the impacted communities and other groups, workers and the other side. But for the waste context, I think the plastic context, we have lots of homework, but it's already starting with the initiative of Just Transition Working Group. Along of the consultation with the International Alliance Waste Pickers, Indigenous Peoples Pact, Indigenous Peoples Caucus in the context of the Plastic Treaty Group. And I think we need to have like more intensive communication and alignment our demand, not like talking. We have difference in something, but we have lots of alignment with alignment within us. I think starting with our truth open-minded and starting with the alignment rather than our difference is one of the key that we can achieve. Okay, the government, the international institution has definition, but we have a strong definition coming from the meaningful consultation from the bottom to the up approach, I think. Battling the narrative, and we need to fight together, not combat each other. Thank you. Maybe it's like more rhetorical, but we need to start imitating the energy context or climate justice movement. Thank you. Back.
Thanks so much, Gopal. I know you've already addressed a lot of this, but I just want to also call that at Gaia, we see just transition not just as a separate pillar, but something that encompasses everything that we do. So any policy consultation, any policy submission, any briefing, any kind of research that we prepare, we have the perspective of just transition, especially from waste pickers' lens, integral to the work that we do from the design stage itself, even including the plans that we prepare internally for our work. So the idea is to keep pushing, and the idea is also to ensure participation of waste picker groups and providing platforms to them and having creating inclusive spaces and also supporting their work through different kind of granting opportunities as well. So that is also my little add. On the question of we have from social media, we have learned that carbon credits is a hoax. Can we also say that plastic credits will also be another way of supporting polluting technologies such as incineration? Absolutely, that is bang on correct. But I would say plastic credits is actually even worse in the sense that plastic credits, green credits, all these recycling credits, all of these credit kind of schemes that are coming up are being used as a way, in fact, to incentivize polluters to continue polluting and to not actually address problem at the source which is stopping plastic production, chemical transparency, stopping chemicals from being added to products and materials, and actually looking at addressing legacy pollution. Like we can address legacy pollution, but we need to simultaneously stop plastic production because we have enough plastics, enough waste in the ecosystem to last, next 500,000 years. That's where we can end today. Thank you so much for all those of you who could stay till the end. Thank you to our members. Thank you to our members from different parts of the region who have taken time, and apologies that the medium of this webinar was English only. We have a very small resource crunch team, but I do appreciate everything. We will be sending out the slides as well as so many different links and resources that we shared. I hope you found this webinar useful. I hope you found the community voices insightful, and please feel free to reach out to us. Please feel free to keep on the fight against incineration and keep on the fight for justice of our communities, our frontline communities, our fence-line communities, waste pickers, waste workers, and mainstreaming their solutions and their voices. Thank you so much. Wish you a good rest of the week, and please participate in all of our actions for this week. Brex, if you have any action points, please feel free to share.
Yes, just would like to thanks Arpita, and thanks everyone. Would just like to note that there might have been some questions that weren't answered, so please do feel free to shoot us an email. I'll type my address over here in the chat. And throughout this week, we'll be having, as we mentioned, the Day of Action Against Incineration activities. We will be sharing things on social media. We invite everyone to please join our social media postings, sharing posts around incineration, why it is false, holding discussions in your communities and groups. And please do follow our posts. We will be posting photos and updates on the ADB ACEF, the Asia Clean Energy Forum, throughout the week and even afterwards. And lastly, we'd also like to, I don't know if anyone has the link, Dan or Trish, but we would like everyone to please have a look at our CSO statement, our sign-on statement on the ADB's safeguard policy on the environment and social framework. This is an ongoing developing policy that basically lays out the guidelines for protections for ADB projects in terms of ecosystems, in terms of people, workers, and so forth. And it's under review, and there will be an updated version to be released in July. So I think that's about it. Please do keep in touch with us, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.